We are live.
Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the August 19th, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. And for those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We are streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone 855-925-2801 and using meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there today with us, welcome. For today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801, meeting code 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. At this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I will go through and introduce all the committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
Affordable Housing Officer Sasha Bertinsky.
Good morning.
Affordable Housing Specialist Alex Ruiz. Homeless Strategy Division Manager Emily Ball.
Good morning.
Community Development Division Manager James Shelton.
Good morning.
And additionally, I would like to welcome staff from Self-Help Credit Union, JJ Freilich, Affordable Housing Sector Leader.
Good morning.
And Tracy Thompson, the Housing Program Associate.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll move into the first item on our agenda, which is the approval of the meeting minutes from last month.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I will now do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner.
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith.
Aye.
And myself, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Up next on our agenda is the year-end Affordable Housing Division Report for monitoring and investments. I'll turn it over now to you, Sasha, for more information.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Glad to be here. Yes, this morning we wanted to present to you a year-end report of what we've been working on over the last year in the Affordable Housing Division. This is the first time we've given this kind of a quick summary. We often get questions about monitoring, and we thought it was worth the time to present to HCD today. And this is just coming to HCD. We don't have plans to bring this to council. Next. So a few key takeaways really quickly. Since September 2024, so the storm really obviously was a big marker for everyone. City Council has approved $3.8 million in new allocations and reallocated $2.465 million from returned funds. So that's a lot of work that we all did together. Monitoring is a really essential part of our program. It's how we make sure that we maintain our commitments to the community and to local developers. In the last year, or really a year and a half, we began the process of standardizing this process and compiling information to help inform future decisions. And if there's nothing else you take away, the staff monitored 26 projects with a total of 1,102 affordable units this past year. Next. So really quickly, I won't read through all these sub-bullet points, but after the storm, you'll recall that we quickly pivoted to get rental assistance underway. We took $1 million of returned housing trust fund monies that were general fund monies, not bond funds, to rental assistance. We contracted with Evelyn, Grace Covenant, and Operation Gateway to distribute those funds. And then 759,000 of CDBG funds were given, of city funds were given to Buncombe County to add to their rental assistance program. So a total of all those different contracts and agreements, the city helped 649 families with about 1.8 million of federal and local funds. Home repair, similar, we took 1.465 of returned funds, bond funds, and turned those to home repair, to storm-related home repair. We have a contract with Archer, which is a collaborative of 5 organizations, and they are moving forward and doing great. They've set up a dashboard, which I believe will eventually become public in the next month or two. And they are really, capacity has been an issue, but they're really overcoming that and expanding their subcontractors, and their work is expanding better and better in the future. So I think we're going to see speedier use of those dollars. Next. Monitoring, I already talked about that a little bit, and Alex is going to talk about that, so I won't say much about that. 319 Biltmore, obviously we brought that project to you on June 24th. We continue to work with Laurel Street and getting all of our agreements in line and all the little pieces that are required for them to get additional funding for that project. Oak Hill, we are in a selection process for a developer. That is a piece of land of about a little under 4 acres that we bought in 2018. It's really suitable for lower density development. We think we'll see home ownership or a mix of rental and home ownership on that site. And that process is going really well, actually. I'll just say that. So bond planning, that's our next agenda item. So I'll talk about that in a minute. Next. And this is just a table summarizing all the different allocations and how that money has been spent. You all have looked at 4 different, individual items for housing projects. Pine Lane Apartments, which you had previously approved, and you approved using that money for the purchase of land there. It's a 4% tax credit project with 126 units. Fairhaven Summit, which is actually getting close to being finished, and they just let me know yesterday, I believe, they have started pre-leasing those units. So that's super exciting. That's 77 units, all affordable. They've got that range, 30%, 50, 60, 70, 80% units. And then, in June, we were at your meeting with 319 and the ABCLT projects. Next. And then just really quickly, this is the pipeline that we have right now. 178 units under construction. We've had several loan closings, and construction maybe hasn't started quite yet. Laurelwood is probably actually underway, but and then we've got several projects that we haven't closed the loan yet, but they're coming. So next. And the next section is monitoring, and I will turn it over to Alex Ruiz. Oh, we can't hear you, Alex. No. No, just.
Nothing?
Yes.
No. No. Yeah, okay.
Not that. So a little bit of background, just generally with monitoring. Every affordable housing program that the city of Asheville is involved with, from Housing Trust Fund to conditional zoning to the land use incentive grant, uses area median income to determine eligibility for any tenants involved. And our procedures for monitoring kind of define how AMI percentage for any given household is calculated. So the gold standard is from 24 CFR Part 5 Subpart F, which is used by HUD in setting policy for public housing and the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Now, the city's affordable housing programs are not subject to those federal regulations themselves. We do kind of set our own standards. However, they have kind of comprised the basis for our monitoring procedures. There's a few reasons for that. Many of the tenants in these monitored properties are receiving that HUD-based voucher assistance. So by utilizing the same standard that the voucher program uses, or at least as the basis for our model for monitoring, we're kind of ensuring that we're comparing like with like and not having one standard for vouchered or assisted tenants and a different standard for those who are paying their entire rents out of their pockets. It does create a universal standard across the different housing programs. So we're not doing something different for Housing Trust Fund than we might for conditional zoning, than we might for anyone else. And it does create a single reference point for landlords, property managers, or city staff. It is extremely useful when I, for instance, am communicating with a property manager who's trying to understand how exactly they're supposed to calculate income for an assisted tenant. If I can point them to a HUD reg and say, this is where this rule is coming from, this is kind of your basis here, and I can send them a link from Cornell Law or something on the HUD website so that they have that backing. So that's just a little bit of basic background. Next slide, please. So the way that we're implementing this process is in January, or actually for next year, we're thinking of moving this up to possibly mid to late December. We contact the property managers in these assisted or managing these assisted units or these monitored units to provide a report on the tenants in their affordable units. They're asked to complete a spreadsheet and submit copies of income documentation that they are using to determine eligibility. This screenshot right here is from our 2024 monitoring. So the year of 2024 completed in 2025. This was sent to every single property manager of a unit that we are monitoring. Next slide, please. So between this year, between February and May, we reviewed reports to ensure that the rents listed for each of the units in each of these monitored properties fall under the published AMI rent limits for the previous year. We also calculated income for individual households to make sure that they fall under those AMI caps. Income is one of those very fuzzy subjects because the standard that HUD uses and that we're using is a little bit different from what you might see for an income calculation on, say, qualifying for a bank loan, or that Social Security might use for qualification of benefits, or that the Veterans Administration might use. So for us specifically, we're using gross wages, Social Security and SSI, child support, unemployment. I'm not going to read the entire list there, but another segment right there are deductions that we have for households with minors, elderly disabled members, adult full-time students. Those have designated deductions, as well as additional deductions that folks can submit on an optional basis. I'll also say here that we are in the process of, something I've learned through the monitoring process is that a lot of property managers, a lot of tenants aren't necessarily aware that these are the types of income that we're looking at, that these are the types of deductions that they may conceivably be eligible for. So part of our efforts moving forward is going to be an education, first with property managers so that they kind of understand these processes, these income determinations, and so that we can all sort of be on more of a universal page about that. Next slide, please.
Actually, I do have a question about how income is calculated.
Yes, ma'am.
So for 2024, we looked at it in 2025. So then it's definitely calculated based on the total income for an entire year?
So the way that the HUD projections are done is that it's not based on necessarily the actual income that the household received. It's based on a projection of income. So just to make it easy, let's say you're looking at a household where the only income on file is Social Security. So
Mhm.
we know they're going to have this amount of money that they receive every single month for the 12-month period. I'm not looking at how much Social Security did they actually receive in that year. I am looking for a projection based on what their current award is.
But-
And I will use that as a calculation.
And so if someone last year received additional funds because of the storm, would that count as a recurring gift, so much so that it might cost them or cause them to lose their units?
No, because that is a one-off type of payment or it's not a payment that they would receive on a recurring basis moving forward.
Okay.
That's why, for instance, on here, we distinguish between recurring gifts and just a one-off gift. If someone gets a birthday check for $1,000 from a family member, that's not recurring. We're not expecting them to get that every single year. So that wouldn't be counted. But if someone has a car payment of $250 every month and they have a parent who lives outside of the home who pays that car payment for them every single month, that would qualify as income.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah, my pleasure. So this is just a screenshot of the City of Asheville Appendix 1. This is available on the City of Asheville's website on the Affordable Housing homepage. These are the income limits that we utilize when we're doing these monitoring calculations. So for someone to qualify, let's say we have a two-person household. That does not matter if the two people are a couple, a married couple, a single parent and their child, siblings, whatever the case may be. A two-person household is a two-person household. And to be designated as, say, 80% AMI, they would need to be grossing, including deductions, an amount of $59,600 as a max. That is just one very, very common example. One thing I do like to point out here is that we include the 120% AMI limit here. And the reason for that is because we often get questions about folks whose income increases over the course of time. Maybe they moved in at, say, 80%. And after a couple of years, maybe they're working, maybe they get promotions, they get better employment, they receive benefits. This is something that comes up very often with veterans benefits, for example. Maybe their income increases and they would no longer be 80%. Very common question we get. And the way that we have it written is that if a household moved in at, let's say, that 80% mark, and then their income kicks up, they can still qualify as in compliance for that 80% rate, so long as, number one, they are only renewing a current lease. So if they move, they will not be 80% anymore. They move, they're going to be under their new amount, 100%, 120%, whatever the case may be. And that will continue as long as they remain in that unit and until they reach 120% AMI. Once they're over 120%, congratulations, it's a quality problem to have. You no longer qualify under here. Your property manager is fully entitled to charge you their fair market rent. God bless. We hope well for you. And at that point, the property manager will be responsible with leasing out that unit to a new family at 80%. So we're trying very hard not to punish people for improving their lot while also maintaining a standard where we're not just letting anybody slip by and it's, it's not rent control, unfortunately. Next slide, please.
I just want to quickly say that's awesome. I've never known that, and it's really good information. I've often kind of wondered about that gray area. Thank you, Alex.
MHO has done that for a long time. So this is really great.
They do the same up to the 120 mark, as long as you stay. That's great.
So as far as our current monitoring efforts are concerned, prior to this year, our efforts were uneven for a number of reasons, generally staff capacity and a general lack of knowledge on best practices. Monitoring has unfortunately been a bit of a back burner item for a number of years. So this year, we initiated our first comprehensive review of affordable projects since before the pandemic. That process for me and for Sasha involved combing through extensive amounts of files to identify which properties still required monitoring, as well as following up to fill in the gaps of those records. We did have some very spotty segments where we didn't necessarily have the contracts, but we had records where certain properties might be appearing in our records with somewhat inconsistent logging of their affordability years. We also made a point of not penalizing any properties that we as the city had not previously been contacting over the last few years, just because we didn't think it particularly fair to ask somebody to show us their monitoring materials from 2020, for example, or 2021 when they might not necessarily have access to that. In some cases, these properties have changed ownership, but are still under monitoring requirements. So we decided to start clean slate this year, move forward and make sure that everyone is aware both of our expectations as well as what resources we have available to make sure that they do remain in compliance. We also created some reference documents for property managers to communicate the updated standards we have and the procedures that we're going to be using for income calculations. This is some quick reference material where I've drawn up some examples of how we expect income to be calculated, sort of some of the pitfalls as far as what income to count, what income not to count, the difference between, semi-monthly income and bi-weekly income, which is, I probably explain that once a week just because a property manager doesn't necessarily understand it. So we've created some materials to disseminate out along with the monitoring materials just to kind of begin that process of educating the property managers in our community as to what it is we're going to be looking for. Next slide, please. And I will give this one over to Sasha. She created this map here that just kind of shows where all of our different monitored units are located throughout the area. So I appreciate her for that one. Next slide, please. A couple of charts. So just breaking down some of the data that we've been able to collect based on our efforts so far. We have affordable units broken down by AMI here. You'll see that there's 509 units at 80% AMI, 557 at 60%, as well as a few mixed there. I should state that that 60% number does include a number of 30% units. The issue there is that between income averaging and the designation for voucher recipients, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to parse that 30% number out from the 60%. So rather than give you incomplete data, I gave you the 60% with this qualifier. Moving forward into next year, we're going to make a bit more of an effort to be able to break that down in a little bit more of a person-by-person basis and allow us to better identify those very, very low income households. Next slide, please. So this gives us a little bit of an idea by funding source. This one was slightly tricky because while we say have 12 units that are under affordability requirements for HTF, we do have a number that are, say, mixed, some CZ and some HTF. We have these CZ and Luigi projects identified there. The Luigi total does include 2 projects which also have a CZ and one with an HTF loan, and then one with both. So the mishmash there can sometimes make showing this data in a graphical format a little tricky, but we did want to make sure that we spoke a little bit to that particular subject. HTF does appear to be the largest contributor in terms of just putting affordable units that are under our purview out into the community. Yes, ma'am?
For the 4 projects that received Luigi funding, were you able to determine how many, if any of those actually accepted vouchers or had people staying in the units with vouchers?
I do know that several of them did have vouchered tenants. I'm happy to dig into my records and I can probably get some more exact numbers for you.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the same would go for conditional zoning projects as well, if you can get that info.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next slide. And this was just a little bit of a breakdown of the different affordability periods. It was very interesting because when I dug into, say, a lot of the files from the earliest HTF loans, several of them were affordable for periods of literally 3 years in a few cases. So those are affordability periods that were long expired. But in terms of the units that we're currently monitoring, we do have a handful that are, the vast majority of them are 30-year affordability periods. And a lot of these are coming from our larger developments that we place under a 30-year affordability period just to close their gaps. We still have several in that 10, 15, 20 mark, and we even have a few units in that 99 range. So this was just a little bit of a breakdown about how that went from period to period, but 30 years definitely was the largest amount that we had. Next slide. And then I will turn this back over to Sasha just to sum up our key takeaways on this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex. I won't go back through those, but that's our report, and love if you have any other questions, happy to entertain them.
Any questions?
And I should have said, Alex gets, all the credit really for monitoring. He brought a lot of knowledge to the job, so.
Yeah, this was really helpful. I'm glad because I feel like for years we've been saying what's going on where and how's everything going. And this is really, really helpful. So I'm very appreciative of this. Sage?
Yeah, I just agree. I don't know that I've ever quite seen the data like that. And I would love to know about the voucher units. So that was a great addition. Thank you, Alex. Great work.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And Sasha, you're still going to be up for the next item on the agenda, which is the Affordable Housing Bond Strategy and Investment in Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund. I'll turn it back over to you, Sasha.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, so we're back in front of you. We just talked about this on, I think it was July 30th or 31st. We are bringing this item back for your consideration. Next, Katie. So, as we all know, voters passed a $20 million bond last November. We have put together a strategy looking at a number of sources, our housing needs assessment, brand new data, affordable housing plan, feedback from stakeholders. So we're bringing this strategy for your information and context, really. We're not asking for a vote on this kind of strategy. And I'll talk more about that in a second. We've been invited to join the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund, which could leverage our funds to enable much larger sources of gap financing for affordable multifamily projects in the city. And if that funding is approved, just want to make sure it's super clear to everybody that that money would only fund units within the city limits. So next. So really quickly, the current context for affordable housing, as we all know, the gap financing is super difficult for affordable housing developers. Those gaps are getting bigger with construction costs going up. We know of at least 8 or 9 projects in the pipeline within the city limits that are currently planning for units, something around, I think I should have put it in here, like maybe 1,300 units or so. And those gaps that we're hearing about from developers total around $100 million. So for context, we have 20 million of bond dollars. Our CDBG-DR program set aside 28 million for multifamily construction. There is some state money. It says 191 million. It's really 133 million for large multifamily, and there's some other funds for smaller multifamily projects. And then there's some other sources for homeownership that are also in our context here. There's some state money from DR for homeowner workforce. They call it workforce homeownership, and then home ARP money is actually for multifamily, but really dedicated to the very lower income folks and preventing homelessness. So this is just the context. Next, Katie. This is the context for where we're making this strategy. Just a quick reminder, bond funds can only pay for capital expenditures. It can help with down payment assistance as well. Next. In 2016, this is the bonds that were passed. It was $25 million, and this is how we spent those funds. So over half of those funds went to housing units. The vast majority of that is for rental. There was 1.8 million that went to home ownership for of those housing unit dollars. We also invested heavily in land and some in infrastructure and pre-development expenses. And then that home repairs, we are talking about the last item, those return funds that we turn towards home repair. Next. So the affordable housing plan is something we look to when we're considering policy and future action for affordable housing. The plan does not prioritize in order specific strategies. It has strategies for homeownership, rental, land trusts, so they're all important tools in the toolbox for affordable housing. It does have some cross-cutting priorities that we, heard from our community that were really important, and that is affordable housing opportunities for individuals with very low incomes, less than 60% AMI, who have the greatest need, permanent or long-term affordability requirements to make our city more affordable for the future, and then also making home improvements that make homes more accessible for residents of all ages and abilities. And then protecting against displacement, of course, is very important. We know what's been happening in our city over the years, and people having to move further out or feeling like they just have to leave Asheville altogether. The plan also calls for the formation of a funding collaborative, which is what the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund embodies. Next. Housing needs assessment data. Overall, we have a housing gap for the next 5 years of over 11,000 units, and that's between rental and home ownership. So just focusing on households with incomes below 80% AMI, there's a projected need over the next 5 years for 4,900 rental units and 1,200 home ownership units. So those are big numbers, but so we try to do as much as we can with what we've got, right? So, yes.
I know these are dire numbers, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out what ULI told us in the retreat, is that Asheville, we've managed to create or to build 2.5 times the national average as it relates to homes. So while there's still a lot that's needed, we're well on our way. And another thing on the previous slide, when you talked about displacement, I would be pleased if we got an actual definition of what displacement actually means, because I received an email from someone on P and Z, and it seemed to include in their mind not just physical displacement, but also cultural displacement.
Absolutely, and our plan actually does define that. And,
Okay.
And I actually said that to P and Z last week.
Okay.
But and they have their own definition they were working on. It's like physical, cultural, economic, and also environmental, right? Like, so if you were living next to the river and all of a sudden that's not really a viable place to live anymore, that can also be a form of displacement, even though it is physical.
Yeah.
The underlying reason's environmental, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Go right ahead. Sorry for the interruption.
Sure, that's all right. Next, Katie. And we did, for the staff report, I will say there's a memo that's attached to it that has additional data from Patrick Bowen. But I did not put all the things in this slide deck. So here's our strategy that we're presenting. Again, it really isn't for a vote. The idea here is that as these items come up, we will bring them to council for a vote. So, for example, in the second item, second line, the city affordable housing projects, you all voted on 319 Billmore already. And so that represents about 1.5 million of that 3 million. We'll be bringing Oak Hill sometime probably this winter for a vote, fall or winter. So today we're really focusing on this $10 million for the multifamily construction. Future action would also include bringing an item to allocate 6 million to the Housing Trust Fund, or it could be whatever, some 6 million or less, and then maybe there's another, carve out for grants or something like that if grants are needed. Yes.
Do we think that 1 million for home repair is for home repairs not related to Helene?
Based on a meeting with Archer representatives, they kind of informed me that it'd be better if it's more flexible. It could be pre-storm and post-storm together, because sometimes they had a pre-existing repair before the storm hit. The storm might have exacerbated it, or maybe they have a new thing from the storm. So if they're trying to serve that household, it's easier if their funds can be really flexible and just do it all. If that makes sense.
It does. Thanks.
Yeah. Next. So, yes.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm still thinking about the previous slide with the number of units that we need, and I just don't want to lose this thought. I'm just kind of curious, and maybe this is something we ask Patrick and his team when they're here, but let me try and walk through this. So if we're in a community where the housing prices for ownership are going up so quickly that majority of the population can no longer afford them, then the demand for rental goes up, right? Do we know if, are we kind of building this scenario? Could it be that we actually need more home ownership, but because the pricing's so high, it's naturally inflating the rental need? Do you know what I mean?
I do, and that would be a great question for Patrick, and I'm sure, we could talk to him about that. I will say the one thing about rental housing is that it prevents people from falling into homelessness. So the one thing we do know from Greg Colburn, who came here a couple of years ago, is that when you look nationwide at all the cities that have the lowest amount of homelessness and homelessness issues are the ones that allowed rental housing to be built. And obviously we're not talking about regulatory things here, but a 4-to-1 ratio of need tells me that there are a lot of people who aren't stable and need rental housing.
Yeah, I'd be curious to tie that unhoused figure to vacancy rates as a trend. Yeah, okay, I don't want to derail. Let's keep going.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good questions. I basically talked through all this entire slide already. Katie, you can go ahead. So proposed allocation to the Housing Loan Fund. Next, Katie. So with us today are representatives of Self-Help Ventures Fund, which they staff the Affordable Housing Loan Fund. And as I said earlier, we were invited to join this fund. It's something that internally we have been thinking about for 2 or 3 years, really, since I started my job, where I would say on a lot of projects, people were looking to the city, the county, and Dogwood to fund their project. They needed all those sources to put together their capital stack. And so we have long time been hoping we could partner with our co-funders in some kind of funding collaborative, and this opportunity has come about. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to JJ Freilich to talk through the self-help slides.
Great. Thank you, Sasha. And thanks again, Vice Mayor and others of the council that inviting us to this call. So as Sasha described, there Self-Help Ventures Fund. We're part of the family of community development financial institutions under Self-Help. You may be more familiar with Self-Help Credit Union in your community. It's, again, a community development financial institution, mission-driven in our work, and we serve as the administrator of the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund. Dogwood Health Trust to date has entirely funded that fund with $40 million, serving 18 counties across Western North Carolina and the Koala boundary. We announced the fund in February 2025, and we've had a lot of activity since then. I think there's a lot of both latent demand and then demand accelerated by Hurricane Helene. I'm glad to say we have one loan closed already. We'll talk a little bit about that loan. About $19 million in origination. That means we're in that process of making loans, and another $18 million in leads. So as you add those numbers up there, $38 million, we're starting to push against the limits of the current fund of $40 million. So this doesn't happen in all communities where we have loan funds, but Western North Carolina has really accelerated. So I think in some ways that pays tribute to the community really trying to get ahead of the curve as we've talked about the housing needs. Again, the city's been invited to participate in the fund, and Self-Help is committed that if we're able to bring city dollars into the Western North Carolina Fund, that those dollars and more be really focused on projects within the city of Asheville. Next slide, please. Just to give you a big picture of the regional funds to date administered by Self-Help, we have a fund in Durham, Wake County, Greensboro, Chapel Hill, and here in Western North Carolina. And we're currently under work originating two other funds in the state for communities. So again, these are regional funds, and we don't have a statewide fund yet. These are, again, regionally located. So based about $154 million under management at the moment, anticipating, should we also grow the fund here to potentially having $254 million again, under management here across the state in these affordable housing loan funds. Next slide. Just giving an example of a type of project. There's really a broad range of projects, and we need about maybe another hour to talk about all the different types of projects we've worked on with our affordable housing loan funds. This project is in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, or NOAA. And a nonprofit developer, CASA, acquired the Grosvenor Gardens apartment complex with an acquisition bridge loan from the Wake Affordable Housing Preservation Fund. So this bridge loan is really designed to bridge the acquisition to the permanent capital stack. Developers oftentimes need time to figure out what the long-range permanent solution is for property to preserve affordability for the long haul. And so the bridge type of lending was what was provided there for this. It was a great mission fit in terms of this historic landmark. There were 62 affordable housing units preserved in the building, and it really targeting the 60 to 80% of area mean income, as was discussed earlier in the monitoring section there. And it's nonprofit ownership. So this is really preserved for the really long haul. And currently so we talked about the bridge loan product. The other product out of the loan funds is gap financing. And that was really highlighted by Sasha in terms of the needs of developers, the gap financing. So we are currently in origination on a gap financing loan for the permanent capital for this project. So they're bringing in a large first mortgage from a supportive bank, a gap financing for the loan fund will come in, other funding from the community. And so now this property, not just being bridged for a few years, but now can be permanently preserved. I think permanently is 30 years or so. Next slide, please. The fund we've closed thus far in the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund is Fairhaven Meadows, not to be confused with Fairhaven Summit, but Fairhaven Meadows, in this case, it was a nearly $1 million subordinated interest-only gap loan. It's a 42-unit affordable rental housing done through the low-income, really supported by the low-income housing tax credits. So that's where the tax credits come in, and that equity provides a big part of the capital. But I think you can see here, if you look on the right side of the slide, we're taking the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund with risk capital and senior funds, currently all from Dogwood Health Trust, that enables our institution to create the subordinate gap financing. So that's a more risky position for a lender, but it's one we're able to do because of the type of capital we've brought into the fund. And I think this on the right side there, when you look at the $15 million project cost for Fairhaven Meadows, it really spells out why the gap financing is so critical. The tax credit equity is bringing in $10 million. Back when these projects were being done maybe 10 years ago, you might have $10 million worth of credits and it was only a $13 million project. Now that you've got a $15 million project, the incomes have not gone up very much. So the rents aren't able to support that senior permanent first mortgage there, doesn't get any bigger. And so you have a widening gap. And so this is where you could see City of Brevard, Home Funds, and then the Western North Carolina Fund came in to fill that gap. So that's really a very common challenge with developers is that, again, rents are stagnant, so the properties can't support the most senior debt in the deal any more than they can. The tax credits are what they are, and so that gap is widening really into a chasm for many projects, and this gap financing helps to cross that chasm. Next slide, please. So just to kind of put a point on the recovery fund here in Western North Carolina, again, $40 million fund. It was really envisioned before the flood, but now even more important with the flood. Dogwood Health Trust really jump-started that investment, really welcoming the city of Asheville to continue that and grow that fund more, to build upon that where it work, and this low-cost flexible financing to help affordable housing developers both have the bridge financing as well as the gap financing. And I think as you ask, well, why a fund? It's really around leveraging and extending the relatively scarce local funding and multiplying that. So taking $10 million and making it $40 million. That's a good example of how that funding works. And with that, I'll turn it over to our program associate based in Asheville. We're super excited to have Tracy Thompson on the team to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the city of Asheville that could be a good candidate for a growth of the loan fund. Next slide, please.
So this is reflective of summaries for what we have in our pipeline currently that is in your area. So for leads, and to explain leads, this is the very initial vetting portion where we're having a lot of back and forth conversations, figuring out the numbers, the pro formas. So there's 5 currently in Asheville, 5 projects that equal 226 units. And in the origination, so this is where they've passed initial vetting and are now working with our loan officers and underwriters through that process. There are 2 projects currently in that stage in Asheville, totaling 92 units. And just some high level summaries here. The average unit size for these requests in Asheville are around 40 units. And then the average loan amount that we've come across for the Asheville area is around $2.1 million. And the table on the right shows common uses for the loan fund in your area in particular. So 2 have been for the bridge loan. So this is the one that JJ touched on, meant for acquisition, trying to get those parcels or existing affordable housing that is meant to be used for future affordable housing. So these types of products exist to acquire the affordable parcel or house or multifamily unit in order just to hold on until you get that permanent financing lined up. And then the other primary uses were our gap products, so that mezzanine or subordinate loan product, that gap filler. And 2 of those were for new construction those were not tax credit projects. And then the other 2 were 9% tax credit projects, and those are new construction as well. And then we had our last gap or mezzanine loan in the pipeline. That's for rehab. So those are your 7 projects in Asheville as of now. And then, Sasha, I think I'm turning it back over to you unless y'all have questions for myself and JJ.
Vice Mayor Mosley.
You're muted.
A couple couple of questions, actually. Is the county participating in the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund?
Not yet. Tracy, do you want to talk at all to the county conversations? Or are they premature to discuss?
Okay.
Yeah,
A second question.
premature. Mhm.
Okay, a second question, and I don't know, this might be for you, Sasha. Is the anticipation that any entity receiving funding from the WNC fund will not seek additional funding from the city of Asheville?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, I guess, let me modify that statement. Those projects will because gaps are so big, they may be pursuing CDBG DR funds, but they wouldn't be, we wouldn't be supporting those with bond funds. So I would actually think that some of these projects are going to need city DR funds and they're going to need state DR funds.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
I just make a note, Vice Mayor Mosley, we do see across the state, oftentimes we'll have projects, they may have 4 different levels of gap financing. That's not unusual. And it, again, depends on the community and the affordability targets you're trying to reach. So the deeper affordability requires as they say, it takes a village and sometimes it takes a larger group there. So thanks very much for that question.
Okay, I got it. Okay, thanks.
Next, Katie. So when we look at this idea and this question, the issue we're bringing to you, really we think of it as what's the but-for test? Like, what is the value proposition here? Like, why are staff asking you all to vote in favor of this? And really the number one reason is to leverage our funds to gain more funds from outside capital to fund affordable housing projects. If it were just to cut down on staff time and free us up to do other things, that's one thing, and then that's what you're voting on, but that's really not the number one thing here. We really are trying to see how can we make our funds go farther for affordable housing. We think it's going to increase the number of projects that the fund can support. It will consolidate and streamline the process for developers into one application, instead of doing both the city and self-help application. And they have a depth of experience that we don't have in terms of underwriting loans. They are accepting loan applications on an ongoing basis. Generally, the turnaround time is 90 days. That's not how the city functions. It takes us, it's not too bad, but we're doing on a cycle, right? So, people are subject to our cycle instead of doing an ongoing application. And, and also it will free us up to do some other activities for implementing the affordable housing plan. Next. We did meet with stakeholders. I talked about this last time at the end of June. We got a variety of feedback. Multifamily developers were generally very supportive and excited about this proposition. Folks developing home ownership were concerned about there being sufficient funding for home ownership. And there were also concerns about non-discrimination clauses and agreements. And they were interested if this fund could eventually also, or even now, fund home ownership projects. That it's not how it's set up right now. We changed how the funding buckets that we presented early on look, and so we consolidated some of those to make them more flexible funds. Oak Hill will likely have home ownership in it as well, and we looked at the option of reducing this contribution, like from 10 million to 8 million, but based on the available data, funding gaps, and the forthcoming funding from the state, we're sticking with that $10 million recommendation. And I should say we have had discussions with self-help staff about inserting that source of income discrimination clauses into our agreements. And I had a follow-up conversation last week with several nonprofits, and we talked about city efforts to how do we really enforce that and make sure that that's happening. And so that's a whole other bucket of beans, I guess you would say. Next, Katie. So we are here asking for a vote from you all to recommend to council this allocation. And then, as I said earlier, later in the fall, we would bring recommendations forward for the other allocations from the bond funds. Next. And then those were key takeaways. And next, Katie, I believe we have a suggested motion for you if you care to make it.
Council, any questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead, Sage.
Thank you, Sasha. We had received an email and a follow-up this morning from the ABCLT. And I think their concern was, will there be funds in the HTF for them to apply for? But, there's so much going on in affordable housing world at the city right now. What pools are available to them, if any, in this upcoming cycle? Like next year, I mean.
I see, yes. So, and Katie, if you can go closer to the beginning where there's that table of the bond.
Yeah.
I think, and this is where I was saying, forward one, there you go.
Yeah.
So that housing trust fund allocation, we only do loans from housing trust fund. And so that's where I was saying, we need to consider, are we putting everything in the housing trust fund? Would we make some of that available for grants to the ABCLT or, to a project that's offering permanent affordability, let's say, or, I think that model is a really, it does the hardest thing, which is permanent affordability, and it requires the most money.
Yeah.
So,
but it can have such meaningful results like this last project that came, and I was really wary of the dollar amount, but it turned out the history of that house was so important. And, those things just pop up when they pop up. So right. I guess I'm just expressing the concern that should other amazing things pop up, we won't be able to move on them or help. And I'll, on the flip side of that, I also don't want the city to become the only source of income for the ABCLT. And I'm not saying that might be the case right now, but, there's other long-term home ownership organizations. I do want us to have something available should it come up.
And the one thing I would just add to that is this, what we don't know, the big question is the state workforce home ownership DR money. Sorry, Vice Mayor, but if that money might be another source for them as well. I'm hoping it is.
I'm trying to remember, didn't we on almost a one-off give a housing trust fund allocation to the housing authority and made it a grant instead of a loan?
It was deed review, right? But then it fell through.
So how deed review worked, yes and no. So how it worked is the first allocation, I believe, it was right before I started full time in this job, but I think it was the 1.465 maybe, and it was straight out of the bond money. So if you come straight out of bond money, you can do a grant.
Oh.
If it goes into the HTF, then it's a loan, and that's a legality thing. So we can. That was.
I remember what we did. What we did was it had gone to the housing trust fund, and then we moved to take it back into the bond, and then we gave them funding out of the bond.
Okay.
And then we added more at the dais.
Yes. Well, it came
and
twice.
Then it got canceled.
It came twice, 2 different times. So
yeah.
There was one round that came straight out of the bond, and the second time, maybe that's what happened, what you're saying, Vice Mayor. So, so there's a way for us to do grants. It's just straight out of the bond.
And I feel like Janice wants to tell us something. Were you getting ready to tell us?
No, I was just, what Sasha said was correct. Bond money, yes, you can make it a grant. And I can't remember that, the one you're saying where we put it into Housing Trust Fund and moved it back. But if that's possible, that's permissible. The Housing Trust Fund is not permissible to make it a grant. And that
So Sasha, does that mean if we wanted to say set aside $1 million for these permanent affordable home ownership projects, that we could do something really weird and say on this slide, reduce the housing trust fund allocation to $5 million and give another spare $1 million back to the bond to be made available, but still keep the loan fund at 10. I mean, is there something to shuffle like that?
Yes, we could. And so those decisions haven't been made. And
Okay.
that's actually what happened for the 2016 bond, is that when staff came
Right.
forward like this, it actually did say ABCO, it did say Community Land Trust, $1 million.
It sure did.
So yes,
I
that's,
would be in favor of something like that. I don't know what it looks like or what that move is, but I do want to express support for that. I want the loan fund to get its 10 million. I would like to see just a fund. I mean, if it doesn't get used, we can reallocate it to somebody else's project. But if it's there and accessible when something amazing pops up, it might be great.
Yeah, so it hasn't even been done yet. So there is no allocation yet. So it wouldn't have to be moved. We can just keep more money in the general fund.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking we've already kind of pre-approved this.
Yeah,
and-
this is
yeah.
something I don't think we're going to look at this until maybe November or something, or on a rolling basis whenever we do it.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, your feedback's very helpful. So any feedback you have, we take into consideration to future items. Yes.
Okay, council, any more questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, do we want to make the motion with the suggestion that $1 million? No.
That's
This
different.
is-
We're only voting for the
Oh,
W.
just this loan fund. Okay. Well,
Loan fund.
I love it and I'm happy to see self-help. I'm thrilled to see there's also a local person. Tracy, thank you for being here. I know self-help was trying to get a local person established for a long time. Wonderful to have you here. So I move to recommend City Council allocates 10 million of affordable housing bond funding to the Western North Carolina Affordable Housing Loan Fund to create affordable rental housing within the city limits, including a loan agreement with Self-Help Ventures Fund for the loan administration, underwriting, and servicing.
Second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Hi.
and myself, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your attendance today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Item number 4 is the Continuum of Care Memorandum of Understanding. Here to walk us through it is Emily Ball. Thanks, Emily.
Hey, good morning. Good to be here with you all. As you just said, this is an agenda item about a memorandum of understanding between the City of Asheville and the Continuum of Care. As you know, the Asheville-Buncombe Continuum of Care, or COC, has designated the city as its lead agency and as its Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS lead. Our function in the Homeless Strategy Division here in the Community and Economic Development Department is to fulfill those responsibilities for the COC. We at city staff have worked with technical assistants and with COC board officers to develop a memorandum of understanding, or MOU, that details expectations for us in fulfilling those roles. And the COC board approved that MOU at their meeting last week, August 14th. So the MOU is now scheduled for city council consideration on August 26th. Bit of background: as collaborative planning bodies rather than standalone organizations, COCs designate a lead agency to provide strategic and administrative support, and also designate an HMIS lead to manage data collection and reporting. The city has served in this role since 2008. There's never been an MOU in place, though, historically. Again, as you know, in 2023, the National Alliance to End Homelessness delivered recommendations to improve our community's homelessness response, and their priority was a restructure of the Continuum of Care to share ownership, share responsibility, share accountability for homelessness response throughout the community. And then following those recommendations, the COC was restructured through a year-long process. New COC membership body met for the first time February 29th of last year, and in that meeting adopted a governance charter which formed the new COC. That charter names the city as the lead agency and the HMIS lead to be reviewed in 3 years, and names the city in those both roles for an initial 3-year period in the new COC, and names that those roles should be detailed in an MOU. We've had a technical assistance provider that's been funded through HUD throughout this governance transition. She supported us in drafting an MOU that was based on the scope established by the charter for each of those roles. And then we reviewed the MOU with COC board officers, who then advanced it to the board for vote. And they again approved it at their meeting last week. The MOU gives a scope of work for each of our roles. So scope of work for our designation as lead agency is what you see here. First, to provide strategic support. So we are training, orientation, technical assistance, recommendations, work plan development. We're the primary liaison with technical assistance providers on behalf of the COC. We provide heavy administrative support. We staff the board, the membership, 5 committees with meeting logistics and materials. We support work groups set up. We manage all record keeping and communications, provide legal review when appropriate and requested, and when the city is not a named party. Also names that we assist the COC in fulfilling regulatory responsibilities, and that we serve as the designated collaborative applicant for COC program funding through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that we apply for and manage grant funding on behalf of the COC in coordination with the funding committee and the fiscal agent. The COC board has recently approved Goodwill as the selected fiscal agent to be able to accept private donations and administer the compensation plan for folks with lived experience of homelessness, among other activities. There may be times when it makes sense for the city to hold funds rather than Goodwill to hold funds based on the nature of the funding available for the COC. So we would negotiate all of that between the funding committee fiscal agent with COC board and city council approval. This also creates the MOU names that we would have an option for a 5% administrative fee if we were handling funds on behalf of the COC. And then the scope of work for the HMIS lead function is to manage all aspects of system administration and operation of the COC's HMIS, so agency and project setup, audit for compliance, maintaining all required documentation, providing training and technical support to engage and onboard new agencies, and then training and technical support to those end users, support the COC in data governance, includes data quality, privacy and security, compliance, policy and procedure development, software implementation, reporting, and integrating HMIS with other systems. To develop and submit accurate and timely reports on behalf of the COC based on federal requirements. So that includes things like the point in time count, housing inventory count, longitudinal systems analysis, and system performance measures. And then lastly, to manage the contract for the HMIS, so to receive federal funds, and then use those funds to execute a contract with the HMIS vendor that the COC has selected. Terms of the MOU are that it is effective unless or until modified or terminated, and that termination would include, could be by either party and would include 120 days written notice along with a reason and an effort to work in good faith to reach a resolution to avoid termination. May be modified in writing with approval from both parties, and does include a detailed assessment process that basically is, we would be assessed by June 30th of 2027. Board officers would survey board members about our performance based on the responsibilities established in the MOU, deliver that feedback to us, negotiate any changes, give us an opportunity to correct any deficiencies, and then present those results back to the board. Following that, we would be assessed every 3 years or as needed. And if concerns were identified, the board could open an RFP to designate a new lead agency or HMIS lead, again with 120 days notice. So key takeaways, again, COC has designated the city as the lead agency and HMIS lead, and we have worked with technical assistance with COC board officers to develop this MOU that the COC board has approved, and then it's now scheduled for city council consideration August 26th. I'm happy to answer any questions, or we have a suggested motion to advance this to council.
Council, any questions, comments? Nikki, can you move forward? Thanks. Shanika, were you going to ask a question?
Nope, I was going to read the motion.
Go right ahead.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding with the Asheville Buncombe Continuum of Care, defining the city's roles as lead agency and the homeless management information system lead.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Turner?
Aye.
Councilwoman Smith?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.
Now, up next on the agenda is item number 5, which is the HCD work planning. And Nikki Reed will start the presentation for us. Nikki?
Great. Good morning. Thank you so much for on the home stretch. This is really a nice bookend to the first item that we reviewed, which was kind of a look back for the year that we just completed, but now looking forward to what we hope to accomplish in this current fiscal year and really provide this overview of those work plan items for HCD. So next slide, Katie. So just a bit of framing here. So if you think back to earlier in this year, City Council established the 4 priority recovery areas that serves as the foundation for developing work plans and allocating recovery resources. Thereafter, we reestablished the 4 council committees, that's HCD and others, that play a central role in shaping policy direction and guiding advisory board contributions. And these council committee scopes and work plans are informed by City Council's annual recovery priorities and goals. And these committee work plans include a combo of ongoing admin items, along with policy considerations that include assignments for advisory boards and other committees. So really, we hope to just frame this up to really connect back to council's priority recovery areas and really see how that tracks all the way down into HCD's work plan today. So next slide, Katie. So again, just to highlight, these are the priority recovery areas that council set forth: people, housing, infrastructure and environment, and economy. Of course, HCD having that strong connection to housing. Next slide, Katie. And then here you see the reestablishment of the 4 committees that really helps aid in the work of council: the Policy, Finance, and Infrastructure Committee, HCD, also the Planning, Economic Development, and Environment Committee, as well as Public Safety. Next slide, Katie. So now let's really drill into the scope. Next slide. So the recovery priorities that were set forward by all of council for housing include to help residents navigate post-disaster housing challenges by connecting them to resources, proactively address future displacement events, support temporary and permanent housing solutions for displaced residents, and to leverage our policy tools and partnerships where possible to expand housing options in the city. Really good example of that today with the Affordable Housing Loan Fund. And then also advancing housing stability efforts such as home repair programs and regulatory flexibility to increase supply. Next slide. So with those goals, we then frame up the HCD committee scope. So really, HCD serves to provide policy recommendations to council on the creation and maintenance of affordable housing, the review of policy matters relating to the provision of services for unhoused individuals, and then the implementation of HUD community development activities and post-disaster housing stability efforts. So really highlighting that role around housing policy that creates and maintains housing within the city. Policy matters, like you just saw, relating to the services of unhoused individuals, and working through the Asheville Buncombe continuum of care in that frame. Next slide. Go ahead, Antoinette.
So something just occurred to me, and the way my mind has been moving, I needed to interrupt because I would have forgotten it by the time you finished. This is like the second time in the meeting that we've talked about displacement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if part of our scope should be displacement analysis, meaning at times, and this is really a question for other council members to maybe ponder and come back to, do you think there are times when we need to look at potential zoning changes in this committee so we can do an analysis of how it could possibly lead to displacement? Okay, we'll think about it. Did my question make sense though? I just want to make sure that I'm kind of clear.
It makes sense. I would like time, if you're asking council to consider, I would like time to kind of consider a change.
Okay, Ben, I see.
Hey, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, definitely can take time to consider that. And I just want to say this is your scope as HCD committee. You can certainly evaluate the scope and kind of the purpose of the committee. So I just want to acknowledge and say, yes, that is something this committee can do.
Okay, so council, let's think about that over the course of the next month and then be prepared to just talk a little bit about it at the next meeting if that's okay. Okay, thanks. Nikki, go ahead.
Appreciate that. And maybe I'll just skip to that second bullet on this slide, advanced housing stability efforts. So perhaps certainly wanting to hear more from the committee if there is interest in really fleshing out another scope item in that regard. But we do see how displacement is also referenced in that bullet. But backing up to the first bullet, we see that the other major component of this scope of this committee is to oversee the city's investments of the Department of Housing and Urban Development programs. And I think this committee is well versed in the steady state, CDBG, and home investments that come through this committee, the annual action plan that we do, as well as we're going to see how this is going to start to connect to some of the DR work that's forthcoming. And so you see that the makeup of our committee there with staff and schedule. So next slide, Katie. So really, I think at this point, this is where we then start to weave in how the scope of the committee starts to connect to the city's overall organizational work plan. So what you're seeing on this slide is our fiscal year 26 organizational work plan, and then how we have started to delegate those work plan items to the different committees. And so, or at least, to the different council priority areas. And I think it's really a direct connection to housing when we look at the implementation of the CDBG-DR housing dollars, as well as the implementation of the affordable housing plan. Those two items are both named as part of our fiscal year 26 organizational work plan. And then in your scope, we'll start to really break those apart and really understand then how those priority alignment, how those particular organizational work plan items will start to come to the committee for further review. If you go to the next slide, Katie, and then the next one, I think that's where we really start to open up to really start to make that connection even on a finer grain level. So if you can recall before, we talked about how the HCD committee's scope is not only ongoing items, which you see there listed under our FY26 core services, as we call it, but as well as these organizational work plan objectives. And so under CDBG-DR for the housing component of the DR elements there, you see we have the state partnership for home repairs. So that's where the city is partnering with the state to fund City of Asheville home repairs under the state's operation for home repair post-Helene. You also see the multifamily housing funding that is a part of the city's DR allocation, and that will cycle through this committee in particular. And also then linking that emergency shelter plan development that's contemplated as part of the overall CDBG-DR funding strategy, and how this committee will play a role in that policy conversation as well. And then under the implementation of the affordable housing plan, we've also named certain elements of that plan that we hope to work on this coming year. Establishing a rental registry is something that we're working on together in partnership with our community. Expanding home repair resources. So again, a goal taken directly from the plan, but now having those bond dollars available to us, we can really start to look at how to expand those home repair resources. You'll note Sasha talked earlier about the 319 Biltmore development as well as the Oak Hill development. So really continuing to develop city-owned land for affordable housing, participating in the Funders Collaborative. We heard a lot about that today. And then improving housing data collection. Again, we're starting off with our monitoring discussion today and really wanting to keep that up and ensuring that we're getting you the data that you'd need to help kind of close the loop on how we make our housing investments. So that's our organizational work plan. On the other side of the screen, then we go into what we would call our core service topics. So continuum of care updates, housing trust fund allocations. We talked a little bit about that earlier with the bond funding and how we're going to bring that forward to this committee later this year. Our steady state CDBG funding allocations year over year, that coming through this committee, the HUD annual action plan, as well as, again, that year-end report on monitoring and investment performance. So with the next slide, I think we're wanting to start to really chart out our timing, just at least in this quarter one, to reflect on how we're going to start to approach this work. And so we had framed this up starting in July. So if you'll recall back in July, we heard the affordable housing plan. I realize now we haven't updated this slide since we had rescheduled this meeting. So really in August, we heard the year-end affordable housing report, as well as the discussion around the affordable housing bond strategy, and then taking action on the affordable housing loan fund. And then in September, we'll hear an update on the CDBG-DR partnership with North Carolina on the home repair MOU that we're developing in partnership with them. So again, really just starting to chart out and reflect on how we are actualizing some of these organizational work plan items through the committee. Our next slide then shares really what we're looking for the year ahead, and just kind of listing out some of these items that we hope to then plot into our quarter 2, 3, 4 of the upcoming fiscal year. So really looking at having quarterly updates from the COC, especially highlighting the COC during the point in time count, to update the committee on that, as well as updates on the progress or ongoing development of the multifamily housing program of the city's CDBG-DR allocation. And then really looking into the funding and policy decisions. So what kind of decisions does this committee make regarding the Oak Hill development proposal? So that will come before this committee prior to council. We are looking again to focus on that home repair work this year, developing that policy, that coming before this committee. Funding recommendations associated with CDBG-DR multifamily. Our annual action plan, of course, will come through this body. And again, our housing trust fund allocations, as well as if there's any policy revisions, or like what we talked about, if there's a certain desire to develop a grant protocol from bond funds to accomplish specific policy objectives. So again, just really trying to frame up all of the work that this committee does and start to look at our year ahead in hopes of what we can accomplish together. I think next slide, Katie, I think that's it. We're back at key takeaways. So again, really excited about the work of this committee. I think we've put in a lot of time and effort to clarify how we work together. And I'm just really excited about it. I really think it's been a very productive year in the past year, and we certainly look forward to working with this committee in the future. So happy to take any questions, but otherwise we're back at key takeaways.
Sage?
I know, right? I'm kind of curious about zoning updates, zoning changes in this next work plan. And I know we as a council have kind of spoken out pretty strongly about legacy neighborhood mapping. And then there's all that missing middle work. And I know we have, I mean, this is probably the fullest our plates have ever been. So I say this with caution and respect for staff time, but I'm wondering where in our trajectory and work planning is a return to some zoning initiatives that we'd worked on. And I wonder if HCD is a good body to kind of try and tackle this legacy neighborhood situation.
Well, Sage, 5 minutes ago, when I said, let's consider whether we want
displacement stuff.
To come.
Yeah. Okay. I wondered if that's what you were
Exactly
alluding
with that
to.
in mind.
Yeah. Because I wonder if sometimes we're complicating it too much in that we're trying to make it a district and it has to be all these things and complicated pieces. But I also just wonder, and I don't know if we lost Janice, but can we not just make reference maps that are referenced in zoning as precluded from, like, is there a simpler way to do this? And I'm not looking for an answer right now, Janice, but I just wonder if this committee wants to kind of target that on a timeline of a work plan.
What we decided was we're going to take the month to think about it and have this conversation more fully.
That's what you meant by the displacement conversation. Okay. Okay.
If that's what, because now we have.
I'm fine with that as long as we're work planning
to do it.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
I would love to hear, I don't know if hearing from legal in this month of time on what those options look like would help, or if you want to do that in a month.
Janice?
We probably need a little bit more specific direction on what you want to see, because I know we've had ideas out there about like a neighborhood conservation overlay. I don't think that, I work with planning and zoning as well. You're asking if this body should is the one. I think this would be the correct council committee to consider this, but you probably have to bring planning staff in as well, because community development staff and planning staff, they do work together. And I know planning and zoning, as Sasha mentioned, they want to know more about how planning and zoning interacts with things like affordable housing or these legacy neighborhoods. So might have to talk about getting planning staff into these meetings and then bringing forward any kind of updates on where we're at with the missing middle and those kind of zoning changes that might impact affordable housing. But again, the legacy neighborhoods, I have not, and Ben, I don't know, you might know better, but I'm not sure where that is in the planning.
It's nowhere right now.
Plan.
It's all
Okay.
halted. It's
And,
all
and how
halted.
we get it
And we
in the
do have
plan, and then what I need to talk to you about.
Well,
Yeah.
again,
I have some ideas about how this could go. I don't think it's going to be, well, we handled it as simply as we could when we carved those out of the updates on flag lots and things like that. But, you know, that wasn't always a perfect solution, because there were planning and zoning members who thought we needed a map amendment, and we said no, we don't think it needs to go back to get this map amendment. So but then the legacy neighborhoods have come and spoken to planning and zoning, and they keep reminding us that they have these neighborhood plans that
so
we don't feel have been implemented.
what we can do is, Sage, if you have your individual questions between now and the next meeting, go ahead and email Janice and Ben. And then we can be prepared to actually figure out exactly what we want to look at in our next meeting.
And Ben and I will both be in PED this afternoon, just a couple hours. So maybe we can mention it there too. Are we work planning in that one too? And just see if there's some cross, you know, maybe we can link up staff or do a little.
Yeah.
joint
think-
meeting. Okay.
I think we can connect those dots between departments, and like Janice said, CED and planning they're on the same floor, literally in the same building, so they work close on a lot of things. Chair, we'll go ahead and include this as an agenda item for next month.
Okay.
And yeah, any questions that you can send us ahead of time will help us make sure we provide what you need. I actually like HCD is maybe the place for this, because I think it has touch points with zoning and we can connect those. But the other thing that I think this committee has is you've got a deeper look into housing policy, how we use funds, home repair. So I think this committee actually can go a little deeper around displacement than just zoning. It can be zoning and the other strategies that may support that. So yeah, we'll be prepared to have that discussion next month.
Perfect.
Great.
I like it.
Everyone.
Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. If not, we'll move on to item 6, which is public comment. And Katie, do we have any speakers in the queue?
Yes, we do. Just one moment.
Okay, thanks.
Caller ending in 5702. Your line is now open and you will have 3 minutes. Just one moment, caller. Let me see. There's technical difficulties. Okay, caller, could you try again, please?
Great. Hello, this is Andy Barnett with Asheville Area Habitat for Humanity and the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I want to start by thanking Sasha and her team for the work on the bond strategy. She's been very responsive to community input on that, and appreciate what came before you today. I do have a couple of concerns about the decision that was made today around the allocation to the loan fund, and that is really ties back to the monitoring presentation that we heard earlier in this meeting. That's been a core issue for AHAC for several years, that we stay on top of monitoring, that we've built provisions into Housing Trust Fund that allow for to achieve the goals of making sure that voucher holders are represented in the units that we create financial incentives for. I just want to make sure that that continues. There's a focus on that piece as funds transfer through to the loan fund. And I know y'all will pay attention to that, but it's very, very important as we move that out of our direct control into a third party that the things that were priorities for us as a city track through as well. I also want to speak to Councilmember Turner's concern and the question about how much of the demand for rental housing would actually prefer to move into homeownership if homeownership was available. We have not had a specific tool for homeownership production in the city prior to 2020 when it became an eligible use under the Housing Trust Fund. I think the signal of $6 million to the Housing Trust Fund out of the bond looks good when it relates just to the bond fund. I think when you look to the overall portfolio of programs and allocations that the city's made toward rental housing, we're sending a signal that the city has a clear priority for one type of housing. And that really, if you look back at the 2017 bond, we had 7% of those funds used toward home ownership. We may be getting the projects that we are signaling that we are interested in funding. So I would just encourage this body to consider, how we prioritize home ownership and what signal that sends to potential developers and how they direct their activity and the kind of projects that we see. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that is our only speaker in the queue.
Okay, well, thank you. Great meeting, everyone. If there are no more questions or comments, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.